Arthur Bishop's eyes snapped open to the sound of crashing waves and the metallic taste of salt in his mouth. His head throbbed, his wrists ached, and when he tried to move, he felt the sharp bite of steel cuffs cutting into his skin. He was lying on the cold floor of what looked like the belly of a cargo ship, dim light flickering above him, the air thick with rust and diesel. Around him were other men, some groaning, some unconscious, all bound like him. He tried to piece together his last memory: a quiet night at his cabin, the smell of rain in the woods, then a flash of light, the slam of a door, and masked men overwhelming him before he could even reach for his pistol. Now he was here, taken, and wherever they were taking him, it wasn't anywhere good. Hours passed in silence, the ship rocking as if cutting through a storm. Then, suddenly, the grinding sound of chains and a heavy door creaked open. A squad of armed guards entered, their faces hidden under black helmets, rifles pointed at the captives. One barked orders in a language Bishop didn't recognize. They dragged the men up one by one, shoving them toward the blinding daylight above deck. When Bishop's turn came, he was hauled to his feet and forced up a narrow staircase. The sea air hit him hard, sharp and clean, but it wasn't freedom, it was another cage. Before him stretched the silhouette of an island, jagged cliffs rising from the waves like teeth. As they drew closer, he saw high watchtowers, spotlights, and a massive concrete wall hugging the shoreline. Barbed wire glittered in the sun, and machine gun nests were perched like vultures. It was no ordinary prison. This was a fortress built to disappear people. As the ship docked, the prisoners were herded onto the pier, guards shouting, dogs barking, chains rattling. Bishop studied everything: the number of guards, the way they moved, the weapons they carried. Old instincts came alive, the part of him that calculated survival like second nature. He didn't know why he was here, but he knew one thing: whoever built this place never intended for its inmates to leave. They marched up a long road into the island's interior, past dead trees and crumbling barracks, until they reached a massive iron gate. Above it, stenciled in fading paint, were two words that made Bishop's blood run cold: Black Ridge. The gates of Black Ridge slammed shut behind them with a sound that echoed like a final verdict. The prisoners were stripped of their cuffs, only to be shoved into a vast courtyard surrounded by steel fences and guard towers. The sun beat down mercilessly, reflecting off the concrete, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Armed guards prowled above with rifles aimed casually at the yard, as if reminding everyone below how easy it would be to end them. Bishop kept his eyes moving. Every detail mattered: the rotation of the guards, the cameras perched on the towers, the number of prisoners. There were more than he expected: dozens of men, maybe hundreds scattered in groups. Some looked broken, hollowed out by time and suffering. Others carried themselves like predators, as sharp postures coiled. These weren't ordinary criminals. These were soldiers, mercenaries, assassins. Men who once fought for governments, cartels, or causes long since forgotten. Bishop recognized the look. These were killers. A loudspeaker crackled and a voice boomed across the yard. Harsh, accented, authoritative. "Welcome to Black Ridge. You are here because you were meant to disappear. There is no trial. There is no release. There is only survival. And only the strong will last." The voice belonged to the warden, though Bishop had yet to see him. Whoever he was, he had built this place not as a prison, but as a pit. A fight broke out almost immediately. Two men clashed near the center of the yard, fists flying, blood spraying across the dirt. The guards didn't intervene. They watched, cheered even. Bishop understood violence wasn't punished here, it was entertainment, maybe even a test. When one man collapsed, his face a ruin, the other was handed a piece of bread as reward. Bishop filed it away in his mind. In Black Ridge, strength was currency, weakness was death. By nightfall, Bishop was thrown into a cell: stone walls, a single cot, a bucket in the corner. His cellmate was already there, a tall man with scars crisscrossing his arms and a dead look in his eyes. He studied Bishop for a long time before speaking. "You're new. You'll be dead by morning if you don't find protection." Bishop sat on the cot, unflinching. "I don't need protection." The man smirked. "They all say that." The hours dragged, the sounds of screams and laughter drifting in from the courtyard. Bishop couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the last days, trying to piece together why he had been taken. He had enemies, yes, too many to count, but kidnapping him, bringing him here, it wasn't random. Someone wanted him silenced, erased. And yet a gnawing thought lingered: if they wanted him dead, why not kill him outright? Why put him here, in this place designed to chew men apart? At dawn, Bishop got his answer. The cell doors clanged open, and the prisoners were herded to the yard. A circle had formed. Guards shouted for order, and then the warden appeared, a tall, broad man with a shaved head, dressed not in uniform but in an immaculate suit. He carried himself with the ease of a king surveying his kingdom. His eyes scanned the prisoners until they landed on Bishop. A slow smile spread across his face. "Arthur Bishop," he said, his voice carrying through the yard. "I wondered when they would deliver you." Bishop felt a chill run through him. The warden knew his name. This wasn't chance. This was personal. The yard went silent when the warden spoke Bishop's name. Every prisoner turned to look at him, some with curiosity, others with recognition. In a place like Black Ridge, names carried weight, and Arthur Bishop's was not just a name, it was a legend. For years in the shadows of war and covert operations, his reputation had been whispered like a ghost story: the soldier who never missed, the operative who never left a mission unfinished, the man who vanished when he chose to vanish. And now, here he was, thrown into the same pit as the rest of them. The warden paced slowly across the dirt, his polished shoes leaving deliberate prints. His eyes never left Bishop. "I built Black Ridge for men like you," he said, his voice calm yet cutting through the air like a blade. "Soldiers without wars, killers without contracts, ghosts with nowhere to haunt. Here, you are stripped of illusion. Here, you are what you truly are, predators in a cage." Bishop's jaw clenched. He didn't respond. He wouldn't give this man the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. The warden stopped just a few feet away, his gaze sharp as steel. "You don't remember me, do you?" A smirk tugged at his lips. "Of course you don't. You only remember the ones you kill." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only Bishop could hear. "Columbia, the village. You pulled the trigger. You killed my brother." The memory struck Bishop like a blade to the gut. Years ago, in a mission that had gone sideways, he had led a covert strike against a cartel stronghold in the jungles of Colombia. The firefight had been brutal, the orders merciless. No survivors. But among the chaos, among the flames and gunfire, he had seen a young man dragged into the crossfire, a face twisted in horror before the bullet ended him. Bishop hadn't known his name, hadn't thought of him again until now. The warden's eyes burned with hatred, barely contained behind his calm exterior. "I've waited years for this, Bishop. Years to bring you here, to strip you of your illusions, to make you rot in the very pit you created for others. You're not here by accident. You're here because I chose it." The guards shoved Bishop forward into the center of the yard. The warden raised his voice, addressing the prisoners. "Tonight, our new guest will prove his worth. If he survives, he lives. If he dies, his body feeds the dogs. Simple." A roar of approval erupted from the prisoners, some pounding their fists against the fence, others laughing in cruel delight. Bishop stood tall, his face unreadable. Inside, however, his mind was racing. The warden wasn't just holding him here for revenge. No, this was something more. This was a game, and Bishop was the prize. As the prisoners closed in around the circle, Bishop realized that the rules of survival in Black Ridge had just changed. This wasn't about blending in or waiting for an opportunity to escape. This was about being forced to play a role in someone else's twisted theater. The warden gave one last smile before turning away. "Welcome home, Bishop. Let's see if the ghost can still bleed." The gate slammed, and the circle tightened. Bishop flexed his fists, his eyes scanning the men who stepped forward: killers, mercenaries, predators just like him. His breath slowed, his muscles tensed. For the first time in years, Arthur Bishop was back in the arena. The circle of prisoners closed around Arthur Bishop like a pack of wolves tightening on prey. Their eyes gleamed with hunger, with the promise of blood, some laughing, others whispering bets under their breath. The guards above leaned over the rails, rifles slung lazily, knowing they wouldn't need them. The warden had given the order. Tonight, the ghost would bleed. A hulking man stepped forward first. His chest was bare, crisscrossed with scars that told the story of 100 battles survived. His fists were like stone, his grin wide and cruel. He cracked his knuckles as he looked Bishop up and down. "Old man," he sneered, his voice carrying across the yard. "I'll end you quick." Bishop didn't move. His breathing was steady, his stance relaxed, almost casual. But his eyes never left the man's shoulders, his hips, the tiny shifts in balance that revealed where the first strike would come. Years of training, of surviving ambushes and assassinations, had honed his instincts sharper than any blade. The brute lunged, throwing a punch that could have caved in a lesser man's skull. Bishop slipped sideways, calm as water, letting the man's momentum carry him past. Then, in a single fluid motion, Bishop struck an elbow to the temple, fast and surgical. The giant staggered, stunned. Bishop pressed the advantage, driving his knee into the man's gut, then slamming his head down onto Bishop's rising fist. The brute collapsed in the dirt, unconscious before he hit the ground. The yard went silent for a heartbeat. Then the roar of the crowd erupted: cheers, curses, the wild laughter of men who had just seen death play its game. The guards shouted in amusement, some even clapping. But the fight wasn't over. Another man stepped forward, wiry and quick, a knife glinting in his hand. He didn't hesitate. He darted in, blade flashing toward Bishop's ribs. Bishop twisted, feeling the sting of steel graze his side, hot blood trickling. But he didn't falter. He caught the man's wrist, twisted until bones cracked, and wrenched the knife free. Before the attacker could scream, Bishop buried the blade in his thigh and shoved him to the ground. The man shrieked, clutching the wound, as Bishop stood over him, knife dripping. The prisoners howled, half in approval, half in rage. Some pressed forward, eager for their chance. Bishop lifted the knife, his voice low but carrying. Who's next? The circle hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. This wasn't some broken old soldier thrown to die. This was someone who had danced with death and learned to lead. High above, the warden watched with narrowed eyes. His smirk faltered, replaced by something darker interest. Bishop wasn't just surviving. He was commanding, and that made him dangerous. The night dragged on. Bishop fought 3 more men, each one faster, meaner, more desperate than the last. He used everything: hands, feet, dirt from the ground, even the broken chain of a fallen prisoner. By the time the guards blew the whistle to end it, Bishop stood blooded but unbroken, his chest heaving, his eyes hard as stone. Around him, bodies lay groaning in the dirt, men who had underestimated the ghost. The prisoners stared at him with a new look now, not just hostility, but respect. In Black Ridge, survival was power, and Arthur Bishop had just proven he wasn't prey. He was predator. The warden leaned over the rail, his voice cutting through the chaos. Impressive, he said coldly. The ghost still remembers how to fight. Good, you'll need it. He paused, letting his words sink in, then added with venom, but don't mistake survival for freedom. You belong to me now, Bishop, and when I'm done with you, the world will remember your name only as a corpse rotting on this island. Bishop wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes never leaving the warden's. His reply was quiet, steady, but it carried like thunder. I've never belonged to anyone. And I'm not about to start now. The yard exploded in shouts, prisoners pounding the fences, guards yelling to restore order. But the seed had been planted. In one night, Arthur Bishop had gone from nameless captive to something far more dangerous: hope. Dawn broke over Black Ridge with a cruel kind of beauty, the sun rising red through the mist, casting long shadows across the fortress walls. The yard still bore the stains of last night's spectacle. Blood darkened the dirt, broken chains glittered in the light, and the groans of the defeated echoed faintly from the infirmary. The guards moved with smug ease, their boots crunching over the ground as if they were strolling through a graveyard. But Arthur Bishop wasn't looking at them, he was looking at the prisoners. Men who had watched him fight the night before now studied him differently. Some with curiosity, others with respect, a few with envy. In a place where survival was the only law, Bishop had shown what it meant to own the night. And though most wouldn't admit it, they felt something dangerous stirring among them. The idea that one man could defy the warden's game. Back in his cell, Bishop's body ached from every blow, every scrape. But pain was familiar. Pain was nothing new. What gnawed at him was the warden's words: Columbia, the brother he had killed, the years of hatred that had built into this elaborate trap. Bishop had been hunted before, betrayed, abandoned, but this was different. This wasn't just revenge. The warden wanted to break him, erase him piece by piece in front of men who were already half dead inside. His cellmate, the scarred man, leaned against the wall, studying Bishop with narrowed eyes. You're not like the others, he said. They fight to live another day. You fight like a man with nothing left to lose. Bishop didn't answer, just wiped the dried blood from his knuckles. The man chuckled bitterly. That's good, because in Black Ridge, men like you don't just survive. They led, and men who led, they either end up kings or corpses. Later, the prisoners were herded into the mess hall, a cavernous steel chamber where watery soup sloshed in rusted bowls and bread came hard as stone. Bishop moved quietly, but he felt the eyes on him. Whispers rippled through the room, some men watching him with something close to admiration, others weighing the risk of testing him. He kept his back to the wall, always scanning, always calculating. That's when he saw him, a figure at the far table, flanked by men who carried themselves with the precision of soldiers, not thugs. The man's hair was silver, his face carved with lines of command, his eyes sharp and cold. When he looked at Bishop, it wasn't with curiosity. It was with recognition. A slow, knowing smile tugged at his lips. He raised his cup in a silent toast. Bishop's stomach tightened. He knew that face. It was Adrian Kane, once a commander in a covert unit Bishop had served under years ago. But Kane was supposed to be dead. Reports had said he'd been executed in a failed coup in Eastern Europe. And yet here he was, alive, imprisoned, or perhaps not imprisoned at all. Bishop's mind spun. If Kane was here, this prison wasn't just a cage. It was a nest, a place where ghosts of the past were kept, hidden from the world, until someone decided to use them again. That night, Bishop sat on his cot, turning it over in his mind. The warden, his vendetta. Kane, the ghost who wasn't dead. The guards, the games. This wasn't just a prison. It was something bigger. And if he didn't figure out what, Black Ridge would become the place where Arthur Bishop disappeared forever. As the lights flickered out and the heavy doors clanged shut, Bishop whispered to himself. His voice barely audible but steady, "If this is their game, I'll change the rules." And somewhere in the shadows of Black Ridge, the warden watched through a camera feed, his smile widening. The rain came hard that night, hammering the rusted roofs of Black Ridge like a war drum. The storm drowned out most sounds except the faint hum of generators, the crackle of radios, and the restless movements of men who hadn't slept in years. Arthur Bishop sat awake on his cot, eyes fixed on the steel ceiling above. His body screamed for rest, but his mind refused to surrender. Every piece of information he had gathered since his arrival, every detail of guard rotations, camera placements, prisoner factions, it all spun in his head like a map waiting to be drawn. Escape wasn't just about breaking walls. It was about breaking the order the warden had built. The next day, the yard buzzed with tension. Bishop could feel it. Prisoners shifted in small groups, eyes darting toward him as whispers passed like wildfire. The fights from 2 nights ago had changed the balance. Men who once bowed their heads now stood straighter when they passed him. Others watched him with hatred, knowing the warden's eyes lingered on Bishop more than anyone else. Black Ridge was built on fear, and Bishop had disrupted it. At midday, the storm clouds broke enough for the prisoners to be herded back into the yard. And there, in the center, waiting with his arms crossed, was Adrian Kane, the silver-haired ghost, alive, standing tall, radiating command even in chains. Guards formed a loose perimeter, but their faces were relaxed. They weren't here to stop anything. They were here to watch. Kane's eyes locked on Bishop, and his voice cut through the yard, cold and precise. "Arthur Bishop, I wondered how long it would take for them to drag you here." Bishop stuttered him, silent, measuring. "They said you were dead," he finally said. Kane smiled thinly. "I was, at least to the world. But Black Ridge isn't a prison, Bishop. It's a vault, a place where men like us are stored until we're useful again. Killers without nations, ghosts without graves." He gestured around at the prisoners. "Look at them. Ex-soldiers, cartel enforcers, intelligence assets too dangerous to leave alive, too valuable to truly kill. The warden collects us, and he profits off the blood we spill." Bishop's jaw tightened. "So what are you? His prisoner or his partner?" Kane chuckled darkly. "Both. I run his games. I train his men. But make no mistake, one day, I'll burn him too. Until then, I play along." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Bishop could hear. "But you've upset the balance. The warden thought you'd break. Instead, you've given these men something worse than rage. You've given them hope. And that makes you more dangerous than anyone here." Before Bishop could reply, a siren blared. Guards shoved prisoners back toward the walls. The loudspeaker cracked alive with the warden's voice. "Tonight, our ghost faces the gauntlet." The yard erupted in noise, cheers, groans, curses. The gauntlet was spoken of in whispers, a trial by fire. Few survived. That evening, Bishop was dragged into the central pit, a crude arena carved into the island's heart, surrounded by floodlights and steel fences. Prisoners lined the edges, shouting, betting, their faces wild with hunger for blood. Bishop stood in the center, barehanded, stripped to nothing but sweat and grit. The gates opened, and 6 men stepped out, armed with knives, clubs, chains. Killers who had survived everything life had thrown at them, now unleashed to tear him apart. The warden appeared high above in his tower, hands clasped behind his back, his voice smooth as poison. "Arthur Bishop, you claim not to belong to me. Tonight, you prove it, or you die." The gates slammed shut. The 6 men spread out, circling like predators. Bishop exhaled slowly, lowering his stance, eyes sharp. He whispered under his breath, not as a prayer, but as a promise, "Let's change the rules." The first man lunged, and the arena exploded into violence. The first attacker lunged with a jagged knife, the steel glinting under the harsh floodlights. Bishop sidestepped at the last second, feeling the blade slice the air where his ribs had been. He caught the man's wrist, twisting until the knife clattered free, then drove his elbow into the man's throat. A choking gasp, a collapse into the dirt. 1 down, 5 to go. The second came fast, swinging a length of chain. The links whistled through the air, striking sparks off the concrete as Bishop ducked low. The chain wrapped around a fence post, tangling for a fraction of a second, just enough. Bishop grabbed the loose end, yanked hard, and dragged the man off balance. A quick knee to the face left him sprawled, unmoving. The crowd roared, prisoners pounding on the steel barriers, some chanting Bishop's name now. The warden watched from above, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowing. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was defiance. 2 more rushed at once, one with a club, the other bare-knuckled but fast. Bishop moved like water, slipping inside the arc of the club, striking the man's ribs with surgical precision. He stole the weapon in one smooth motion and turned it into the other man's jaw, the crack of bone echoing through the arena. The second man dropped, blood spraying across the dirt. 4 down. The fifth circled carefully, learning from the other's mistakes. He was leaner, sharper, eyes burning with hate. He feinted left, then darted right, slashing with a small blade hidden in his palm. The cut grazed Bishop's forearm, hot pain blooming instantly. But Bishop didn't flinch. He stepped into the man's guard, slammed his head forward, and felt the crunch of cartilage under his skull. The man crumpled, groaning, spitting blood into the dirt, only one left. The final fighter was no ordinary convict. His shoulders were massive, tattoos running across his chest like a map of war. He smiled as he approached, calm, deliberate, almost eager. In his hand was a jagged piece of rebar sharpened to a deadly point. The crowd hushed, sensing this was different. Even the guards leaned forward. The man circled Bishop, speaking in a low growl. "You're good, but you bleed like the rest." He lunged, the rebar stabbing straight for Bishop's heart. Time slowed. Bishop shifted his body a fraction, letting the strike graze his side instead of impale. Pain tore through him, but he locked both hands on the rebar, forcing it downward, twisting, using the man's momentum against him. They grappled, muscles straining, faces inches apart, each trying to drive the steel into the other. The crowd screamed, a wall of noise. With a guttural roar, Bishop slammed his knee into the man's leg, snapping it with a sickening crunch. The giant roared in agony, collapsing to one side. Bishop wrenched the rebar free and, in a single brutal motion, drove it into the dirt an inch from the man's throat. The arena fell silent. Bishop stood, blooded, chest heaving, but alive. He dropped the rebar at his feet, lifting his gaze to the warden's tower. His voice was hoarse but steady, carrying across the pit. "You wanted a ghost? Now you've got one." The prisoners erupted, some cheering, some screaming his name, others pounding the steel so hard the whole arena shook. For the first time, the warden's smile was gone. His plan to break Bishop had backfired. Instead, Bishop had become something worse than a survivor. He had become a symbol, and in Black Ridge, symbols were dangerous. The crowd's roar still rattled the steel walls when the sirens cut through the air. Harsh floodlights snapped back to full power, blinding the prisoners, silencing the chants. Armed guards poured into the arena, rifles raised, surrounding Bishop like wolves circling a lion. But he didn't move. He simply stood there, chest heaving, blood trickling down his arm, his eyes fixed on the warden's glass tower. The reinforced door above hissed open, and the warden stepped out onto the balcony. No smile this time, just a cold, measured stare. He raised a hand, and the guards froze, rifles still trained on Bishop but fingers easing off the triggers. For a long moment, the prison hung in silence, nothing but the hum of the lights and Bishop's steady breathing. Then the warden spoke, his voice amplified across the arena. "Arthur Bishop, ghost of shadows. The man who breaks every chain placed on him." His tone wasn't mocking this time. It was calculating, respectful even. "You were never meant to survive that gauntlet. Yet here you stand," the prisoners murmured, tension rippling through them. The warden leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Killing you now would be wasteful." "No, I see a better use." He gestured, and a screen flickered to life behind him, showing grainy surveillance footage, armed convoys, drug lords, politicians, mercenaries. A web of corruption sprawling across continents. "These are the men who pay me. The men who built this place. They fear you, Bishop. They've always feared you." Bishop's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The warden continued, his voice lowering. "Join me. Use your skills, your legend, not against me but for me. Together, we could tear down the world and rebuild it. Power, wealth, freedom, everything you've been denied since you lost your daughter. All within your grasp." The crowd gasped. Even the guards shifted uncomfortably. The warden had just exposed Bishop's past, the wound that never healed. Bishop's hands curled into fists, but his face stayed unreadable, stone cold. The warden's eyes gleamed. "Well, refuse, and I throw you back into this pit, night after night, until there's nothing left of Arthur Bishop but a broken carcass rotting in the dirt. Choose carefully, ghost. This prison can be your grave, or your throne." The guards lowered their rifles slightly, waiting for Bishop's answer. The prisoners leaned forward, holding their breath. Bishop raised his head slowly, his eyes locking onto the warden. His voice was quiet, but every soul in the arena heard it. "You made one mistake." A pause, heavy with venom. "You think I want your throne." The warden's smirk flickered back, thin and dangerous. "Then what do you want, Bishop?" Bishop stepped forward, blooded and unbroken, his shadow stretching across the dirt. "I want you." The arena exploded in chaos, shouts, screams, guards shouting orders. But the warden didn't flinch. He only smiled again, this time darker, colder. "Then the game begins." The moment Bishop uttered those words, "I want you," the warden's smirk froze. The arena became chaos, guards swarmed, prisoners roared, the lights flickered. Bishop didn't wait. He moved with precision, ripping a rifle from the nearest guard, slamming its stock into another's jaw. A storm of bullets cracked through the night, but Bishop ducked, rolled, and used one guard as a shield. The prisoners, electrified by Bishop's defiance, erupted into frenzy. Chains became weapons, fists turned into hammers. The balance of power shifted in seconds. For the first time, the warden saw his own grip slipping. He barked orders from the balcony, but Bishop was already moving toward him like a predator locked on prey. A blast door began to lower, sealing the warden's tower. Bishop sprinted, every muscle screaming, every wound burning. He leapt onto the rising steel, hauling himself up with raw fury. Bullets sparked off the metal, but nothing slowed him. He reached the balcony as the last gap was closing and forced himself through, collapsing into the warden's chamber. The two men faced each other, no guards left, no audience, just the hunter and his quarry. The warden reached for his pistol, but Bishop was faster. He slammed the gun aside, driving his fist into the man's ribs, again and again, until the warden gasped, spitting blood. Pinned against the glass, the warden sneered through broken teeth. "If you kill me, another will rise. You'll never be free." Bishop leaned close, his voice low and cold. "I'm not here for freedom. I'm here for justice," and with one brutal motion, he hurled the warden through the glass. The man's scream was cut short as he plummeted into the chaos below, the crowd swallowing him like vultures. The prison sirens wailed. The gates, damaged in the uprising, swung wide open. Bishop stood over the carnage, chest heaving, blooded but unbroken. He had no illusions this wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was a beginning. As dawn broke over the horizon, Bishop disappeared into the wilderness beyond the island, a ghost once more, leaving behind a legend whispered by every prisoner who survived. Arthur Bishop doesn't escape prisons. He burns them to the ground.